it comes to using content from places like Reddit, is that something we're legally allowed to do? Let's talk to our favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, to find out more.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Tony, one of the things we see a lot on social media is people reading passages from places like Reddit and putting that on social media. From a legal perspective, are we allowed to do this?
So I think that it's going to depend on essentially a two-tier analysis. So first, it's an honest discussion about the Reddit post itself and whether or not it meets the criteria of being a copyrighted work. So we've all talked about it. I've said it ad nauseum to the point that probably you're ready to write it as a tattoo on your wrist. But copyright is an original work of authorship that is fixed in a tangible medium of expression. So arguably, when you write a post on a platform like Reddit, there is that fixation element. It is a work of authorship because it's a written type of work. There is an inherent copyright nature to a post like that. Now, I think that this extends to all social media content out there, right? And it down to even like an Instagram caption or a Facebook post. There are things that authors of these works authentically put into whatever they create. And I think that that rule is no different in the context of a Reddit post. When a Redditor authentically writes about, a bad experience at a deli or some tips and tricks that they have about, tech or anything that would be in a subreddit, that should be, for the most part, viewed as an authentic copyrighted work. Now, we get to, I guess, the second tier of this analysis, which is how are you using this Reddit post? So in a world where you are using someone else's copyrighted work, again, the expectation is that you're using that specific work with permission from the true copyright owner. But there is a world where you could use someone else's copyrighted work as essentially, in this case, some type of fair use. I think it could qualify as a fair use, but we've talked about it before. Fair use typically has applied as a defense to copyright infringement, so long as you're using someone else's copyrighted work for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. And if you're not using it for any of those purposes, that's where I've always said, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Now, again, typically fair use is operated as a defense to copyright infringement. So if you're reading someone else's copyrighted work, in this case, a Reddit post, you could be accused of copyright infringement by reading word for word whatever that person wrote on a Reddit post. And, let's say you didn't provide attribution to the true owner, the true writer of that post. That said, now the question comes up, what have you done that would qualify as, let's say, some type of transformative work? What have you done to qualify as the criticism, the commentary, the news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research when you're reading someone else's Reddit post on a TikTok video or on a YouTube post? In theory, when you're reading someone's Reddit post and then you're supplementing it with extra commentary, you're adding maybe some additional information, embellishing some info that wasn't necessarily apparent in that initial Reddit post, that's when it does change the inherent nature of that work. And I think, in my opinion, would qualify as something that does meet the criteria of not only transformative fair use, but I think more broadly fair use as a whole. Now, that said, what I am not endorsing by making these statements is saying that anytime you read a Reddit post and you provide commentary, that it's going to meet the fair use definition. I'm just providing a very rose-colored, unicorn, fairy, rainbow type of perspective. Because again, in theory, the reading of a Reddit post supplemented with commentary, in theory, satisfies a definition of the fair use doctrine. But every fact pattern is different. Every fact pattern mold when it comes to reading someone else's copyrighted work, in this case, Reddit post, and providing with some additional commentary, it's going to vary on a case-by-case basis. This is not a cookie-cutter model that's going to apply universally across the board with all types of readings of Reddit posts out there. So I think the word of caution that I would give any listeners out there is to just evaluate each scenario in its own unique format. Again, evaluate how you're providing that commentary. And of course, if you have any doubts whatsoever, if you're a professional content creator and you have no idea how the fair use doctrine truly operates, and you rely heavily on this type of thing because this is the nature of your business, then this is where I would say go to your lawyer, contact a lawyer for some guidance, maybe a brush up on what the fair use doctrine is. Do not rely on Google School of Law. Rely on an actual lawyer that has specialized in the fair use doctrine that can help give you the necessary guidance on how to approach the fair use doctrine, especially when you're reading someone else's Reddit posts.
So my follow-up question to this would be, is it okay for people then to be posting these videos where they do have commentary as well as reading these posts? And then are they allowed to just use clips where they're just reading the post, or is that something we need to be cautious of?
So I would say the reading of just the post is where it becomes a bit more prickly, especially if you're in the school of thought of just like, let's say, reading the Reddit post without providing the attribution to the author. Now, where this could become a little bit different is if, let's say that there's a Reddit post where it's like a dialogue between two people, character one and character two. And let's say that there's a TikToker out there that does reenactments of conversations between two people that are posted as Reddit posts on Reddit. And they actually play out the characters with, they play character one and character two, and they have a certain syntax, a certain tone, a certain voice in how they evoke the character. Now, even though they're reading the post word for word as the characters, they're play acting in a way that is inherently transformative, does have that panache of operating almost like a parody, thus kind of operating as a criticism or commentary that could meet the criteria of fair use. So I think that is probably like the one exception to the rule where reading a post word for word would be okay. If, like, let's say you're play acting, you're reenacting it in the form of like a playful, humorous type of fashion. But that said, just reading it straight up without any attribution, that's when it becomes truly problematic. That's like no different than reading a book on TikTok Live or on YouTube Live without giving attribution to the author or without even getting a license. Now, not saying that you need to necessarily get a license from the Redditor that posts that provides that post. You could. I don't think that there's any problem with that. But if you want to save yourself a little bit of that stress of having to do the outreach, why not just supplement it with the commentary? And I think that that's where the fair use doctrine could come in handy. And it's very common in the social media sphere for other people to use other social media posts and comment on it as the catalyst of them making viral content. And that's essentially how the social media sphere works. So I would say that's where it would be an approved use and an okay use of reading a Reddit post.
And as always, if you have questions on this because it's something that you want to do, see your lawyer. Your lawyer will be able to guide you on this process. But if you have further questions for Tony, he's coming back for upcoming episodes. And as always, you can reach out to Tony on his social media. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor. And you can check out my entertainment law podcast called End Scene, with new episodes dropping every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Drop your questions down below. Tony's coming back for upcoming episodes, and we're dropping daily videos to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship to make this your most profitable and most stress-free year ever. We'll see you in the next episode.